Thank you for joining us on today's edition of The Angle. We are just about a week away from elections, which means polls continue to come in, including one from the European Friends of Armenia, which was released over the weekend, with some very interesting data and results that we'd like to talk about. So we're joined today by Dr. Michael Kambeck from the European Friends of Armenia. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Steve Schwartzer from TNS Polling.
TNS Opinion.
TNS Opinion. Thank you guys both so much for joining us. Let's get right into it. When you look at graph 25 and you start to see results of who's expected to do what, a few things jump off the page. Immediately it's obvious, as we've said before, that two parties are well ahead, but then of the four other parties sort of competing, we have them falling pretty low. I wonder, I'll start with you, Michael, if it's possible to explain why that is, and if you think these are the numbers that will actually play out on election day.
We have seen a significant increase, almost doubling, on the part of the Heritage Party, and we have also seen a small progress for the Rule of Law Party, Dașnac-Stăciun very stable, and Armenian Congress also pretty stable. So that's just the way we can pick up the data. Second thing is, you see in our slide that we've put a line underneath the Armenian National Congress. So those are the parties who we actually believe are going to move in. And that is despite the fact that Armenian National Congress has 4.3%, which is way off the 7% that as a party bloc they will need. Now it's not my thing to comment on why they decided not to run as a party and only need to cross 5% but need to cross 7%. But that is just to tell you, for the more radical parties, and Steve can actually say more about this, but for the more radical parties we expect a disproportionately high rate of people who never take part in any opinion poll. And that is why we believe they have a good chance to still move in.
Sure. Steve, if you could explain that. Explain the fear factor in terms of the results you got, and what percentage of people refused to answer when you went to wherever they were.
Okay, what we found is that when we look into the data, and you take not only this question but also other questions, is that the electorate for the small party is very stable. So of course they increased since March, but you see that they are really certain about their choice. So they know what they are going to vote for on the election day. The second thing, with respect to the refusal rate or participation rate, what we see in this poll, and this is the same for the March poll, is a participation rate of about 23–25%, and this is quite normal for face-to-face opinion polling. This is something you also see in Western Europe as a figure.
But let's talk about fear factor on the part of the people you're trying to get to respond. And we'll do it with a specific example. Let's do it with the example of the Armenian National Congress. We're not doing poll comparisons, but we have seen some polls where some people have projected they'll get as high as 8, 9, maybe even 10%. Yours is a little bit lower than that. Specifically in relation to that party, which is the outright, outspoken opposition to the Republican Party, how much do you think fear factor plays a part in whether or not people will tell you they're voting for that party?
We have analyzed, for example, those people who tell us, no, I refuse to answer the question who I will vote for. And then we've had a second question to control this, to ask them, so is your vote, are you certain to vote? And they said, yes, I will definitely go and vote, but I'm not telling you who for. And then we've asked another question, so is your vote final? Is your decision final? And they said, yes, my decision is final, and I will go and vote, but I'm not going to tell you who for. Right. So this is a very specific group. It was about 11.5% who refused to answer. And we've made cross-analysis of this 11.5%, and we found that, yes, there is still about 1 percentage point in there, which is also for Republican, and 1.5 for Prosperous or something like this, but disproportionately high, they are for the oppositional groups, which you could expect, and we have taken that into account when we made this final projection of who will come into the parliament. And that is why there you see, if you like, we are being very honest. We show the data as we've measured it, but we have also given our interpretation. That is why this line is there. That's why it was in our press release, and also that is why in this projection things look a bit different.
All right, we're going to change the subject a little bit. We'll go to graph 23, and this sticks out to me, as this will be the first election I've observed Between certain to vote and likely to vote, you have, of course, these are all people who are in the country, which will affect the numbers, a percentage of 86%, more than 85%. And of people who are certain they're not going to vote, it's less than 10%. Should we expect super high turnout, or what should we glean from these numbers?
You should be careful with these numbers because this is again 2 weeks. The data are from 2 weeks before the election. So of course people also show a kind of a social desirable behavior that they say, okay, of course I will participate with the election. But what the experience tells us is that at least the number for certain to vote is pretty close, normally pretty close to what you could expect for the turnout rates. Of course, there are other conditions, other factors which in the end affect whether someone is participating in elections or not. Even the weather is sometimes accounted for. I think the certain to vote is always a good rule of thumb to expect something from the turnout rate.
Sure. Without being a polling expert, I would expect that if I was asked whether I was going to vote, just based on that question alone, no matter how fair you try and phrase it, I'm more likely to say that I am going to vote. Is that right?
Yeah, that's I think what you meant with social desire. Yeah, it's like, you know, it's socially more acceptable to say I will take part in the vote. So this if you see a change with real data, it is normally a bit lower than what you measure. And also we can expect that those people who never take part in any opinion polling are also those who are more likely not to take part in the vote itself. So your question is very fair. We expect the real turnout to be a bit lower than what we measure here, but it's a very good sign that the degree is very low. Imagine we would measure 50%, we would really have a problem. Yeah, people would say these elections are totally ridiculous and we will not take part. This is not the case, and on top of that we have seen that the number of people who are certain to vote went up quite significantly between March and April, which is a good sign. It means the campaign has mobilized people. It has people know there will be elections, and more people do actually want to go and vote.
Sure. Okay, you're being positive. I'm now going to be negative. If you look at number 21, it is good to see that more people are interested. However, basically, we're talking about March to April, which is the pre-election campaign season. And, you know, specifically in the second and third question where they say there's a party in our country which more or less represents your interests, it's gone down in voter confidence. One can never trust any party to keep its promises. It's gone up in voter de-confidence, which isn't a word, but you understand what I'm saying. What I'm seeing, tell me if I'm wrong, is over the course of the campaign, even though more people might say they're going to vote, they don't really feel any better about the way this is going. Is that accurate?
Well, first of all, and I've said that in the press conference as well, the data between March and April shows that all of those questions, which are long-term questions, they are not, you know, how you feel about your country will normally not change in a week or in a few weeks. They are very much confirmed. The whole data, if you look at it, it's you know, so many different questions on this one slide, but you can see that most of the levels are very, very close to what we measured already in March.
What I was saying is, specifically if you look at question number 2, that's the type of question that I would think a political party is supposed to be spending its campaign. So to me, if you're looking at a whole campaign, staying flat is as bad as nothing happening, because this is the month where everybody's supposed to show their best side. And, you know, I know you say it's an ingrained problem and it's a long-term problem.
No. I think you're hitting exactly the point. It's around 50% who say there is a party which more or less represents our interests. If you look at a different question, which is on problem solving, you see that only around the same percentage, namely around 50% of the people, vote for a certain party because they expect that party to solve their problem. The other 50% vote for a certain party for totally different reasons, because they like the people, or because they like the charity work, or because their brother is member of this party. And those reasons in Armenia are disproportionately high. So, you know, this also you need to put into the perspective of the country context.
Perfect piggyback off that question is going to graph 28. Some of my questions will be opinion questions, some will be, you know, explaining data questions. 4 numbers I circled. Let's start with the Republican Party because they're the first on the list. Let's go to the 4th column, the 18%. It says I have personal links to the party or members. 1, that's the highest number of any party. First of all, if you could clarify what personal links means. Does that mean I'm related to a member? Does that mean I work for a company where a member is the head of the company? What does personal links mean?
This is exactly it. We don't know what it means, but it shows that there is some kind of a relationship ongoing between, or there's some kind of interaction ongoing between the party and something in the family or friends. So we left it vague because you cannot ask people directly why they or whether they are voting or going to vote for a party because they have a very strong relationship, biased relationship, by whatever means biased. So. This is exactly the vagueness here, but in the end, it pretty much explains what's going on because it's only for the Republican Party that you can find this. And when you look into data of occupation, then you see that especially state employees show a tendency to vote for Republican Party. So there you have at least one piece of information which gives you good or a ground for interpretation or for the interpretation of this particular item here.
Right. So Michael, we think that obviously the Republican Party is the largest party and has, I guess, been around, not necessarily the longest, but it has been around a while. So that could by itself explain 18%, but we think the reason is closer to what he was saying?
No, it's exactly like Steve said. You must, however, compare it also to the other 4 columns. So we've given them 4 options. And it's still 50% who say I vote for this party because of the program. It's still 55% who say I vote for this party because I trust the leader or member of this party. And the 18% within the block of voters for the Republican Party is still the lowest block. So even if you assume some of them maybe didn't even tell us that they have a personal link and because they're ashamed of it or whatever, this is the highest number, but at the same time it's not a problematic number. It's not the main reason by far why people vote for this party. So I'm not really worried about this one. We have also seen that, especially the, like you said, the state employees, they have gone up mostly for rule of law party and not for the Republican Party. So the biggest move in the campaign in the last years, in the last months, mobilizing people among state employees has happened for the rule of law party. I'm not. This is not my biggest headache on this this chart.
We'll get to one in a second. I just want one more about that. The fact there are so many reports, substantiated or unsubstantiated, that say teachers, for example, are forced to come to rallies or whatever it might be. This doesn't concern you? No,
I don't know if those people told us. I cannot. We cannot see that from the data. If this, there are 2 explanations possible. Either these things are happening, but they're happening on a much lower scale than is being discussed, and each time, even there is just a few cases, it's such a big scandal that it gets noticed very much. This is one possible explanation. The other explanation possible is that it is actually happening on a quite large scale, but those people who are concerned just never tell us this. Right. Even though we already formulated, like Steve rightfully said, this question in a way to even pick them up, to invite them in a nice way, do you have some links? There's no shame in having your brother being member of a party. So, you can just answer yes to this question. But still, people didn't tell us this. So from the data, we cannot conclude that this is the biggest problem.
Okay. The next number that I'd like to talk about, we'll go down the list, Prosperous Armenia. If you look at the charity question, nobody has more than 35%, and then Prosperous Armenia has 82%. I'll just leave it open-ended. What do you think?
It's very difficult. I mean, it speaks for itself. Most people vote for this party because they like the charity work. And for us, it's a problematic, for us as European Friends of Armenia, it's a problematic score for one reason. The charity was founded more or less at the same time as the party. And since then, they've been active in parallel. And those links between the charity and the party are visibly affecting the electorate. You can see it. It's really couldn't be clearer. And this is not a democratic process. So here we see, luckily during the campaign phase, there is a prohibition on charity work. But we all agree, and you can still see this even after the campaign, this is the dominant factor why people vote for this party. Now you can say they're just fed up with politics, they might as well just pick up a bit of charity work. Charity can be anything. It can be that you receive some potatoes in a village, or it can be that your kindergarten gets repaired. But this is, of course, all kindergartens in Armenia should be repaired, and it should be done by the state and not by one charity. And politics has to solve these problems. And here I think there needs to be a bit of education for the Armenian voters. Do not give your vote for anything except for good politics. Somebody wants to pay you, don't give it. Somebody wants to say you're a teacher in our school and that's why for all our schools gonna vote for this party, you must do the same.
This also includes whether somebody wants to give you an appointment.
Sorry?
That would also include whether or not a political appointment is promised, or vote for us, you'll move up to this position. That would include that as well, correct?
Well, in politics itself, I think that's a very minute and unmeasurable number of people who will get a political position, I think. But if you talk about state employees, of course, that would be as problematic. And I think but we couldn't measure this here. What we have measured is that for the charity aspect, even for the other parties, okay, for the Prosperous Armenia Party, it's the dominant reason, okay, that's really problematic. But even I would have been unhappy with the other values as well. So if even for an oppositional party like the Heritage Party, you get 30% saying I vote for this party because they help the people with their charity work. I'm sorry, for me that's insane.
So anything over 5 or 10% to you is?
I think it
should be zero across the board.
Well, in an ideal world, it should be zero across the board.
Right.
But an interesting fact is that also when we look at the campaign means how parties contact voters. You see only for the Prosperous Armenia that voters or our respondents say they were contacted by Prosperous Armenia by charity work. And this is by large the highest number here, which we can find for the means of campaigning. And this is really interesting. That stands out like this.
Okay, we're running long, so we'll go to the last graph. But I'll just point out two other numbers on 28. Interesting that things that a logical or idealistic person would expect would influence vote. Heritage Party has the highest number of people who trust the leadership of the party. And ARF, along with the Communist Party, has the highest number of people who like their political program or platform. Okay, let's go to the last page, 32, where you have more or less made a projection. Just so our audience knows, if a party gets to 66, whether that be through majoritarian or parliamentarian, the added up number, they will have a majority and they will be able to, let's just say it, they can pretty much do what they want. Within reason. You can push things through.
Oh, you mean if it's one party?
Yes,
if
it's one party. So, we're looking at two graphs here. One has the Republicans getting to the 66 number, and one does not. We'll start there. What should we take from these?
Look, we've done two extreme projections so that we are sure that both of our projections are always really based on our data. Because the small parties are so close around the 5% or respectively 7% threshold, it is not serious now to say we know who's going to come in. In our most likely projection, which is this one, we assume that they all make it. So
six parties.
Yeah, 6 parties. And that takes into account all the things that we've already been discussing about the ANC, but it also takes into account that there is an upwards trend for Heritage and that the others are fairly stable. So, this is the picture. We also are proud that we were able to analyze most of the majoritarian seats, and only 11 of them were so close that with our sampling of 1,600, it would not be serious to say, I already know what's going to be the outcome. The other ones are so clear that even with this sample, you can already pretty much say it. And that also showed us that the ANC will definitely have one in the parliament, and, you know, not definitely, but very likely, rule of law, too direct, etc. And this gives us this picture. So in this picture, we didn't quite know where to put Prosperous Armenia. Are they oppositional or not? So
they have their own category over here.
Yeah, they have kind of their own category, and they're neither red nor blue, okay. So they are kind of in the pinkish or area. But apart from that, it looks like the Republican Party will have the biggest share. That is clear. The question is, and your question was also, will they have 66 on their own? We think it's not very likely, but theoretically, and this was the other extreme, if all the small ones drop out, and the race between the two top runners becomes even more heated, then of course the small ones by comparison lose out more, then this could happen. Or of course also if you have falsifications which really push them down, then this could also happen. But quite frankly, on the basis of the data that we see, it's more likely that there will be enough parties in there to, in the end, make various coalitions possible, but also necessary.
Dr. Michael Kambeck, thanks for joining us. Dr. Steve Schwarzer, thank you very much.